Yeah, as he said, I'm Ryan DeSanto. I'm at NetEase. Been there for about a year now. Manage business development in the West. We just announced a new fund where we're financing user acquisition for game studios. So if you have a game that you're about to launch, let us know. We'd love to talk with you. It's been here about a year now, just a year and a few days. And my first day on the job, I got into a plane, flew over to Shanghai, and walked off the plane and walked into China Joy, and immediately realized just how different it is over there, just how drastically different everything works. And since then I've been really curious and just doing my best to learn and educate myself on how to bring games to China and also how to bring games over here, because that's our North American division's main focus is actually bringing our games that are made in China to the West. And so, I'm excited to share some of the things that we've learned with you guys. So not everybody knows who NetEase is. We've been kind of really focused on China for the last 10 years. And so just a little background in case you don't know who we are. We're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Right now have an $18.5 billion market cap. We were founded in 1997. Originally, started out with 163.com, which was we were kind of like the Yahoo of China, where it was a news and entertainment portal, also email, no search. But then since then, we've gone on to do a lot of things, and that is NetEase branded pork. We have apparently the most high-tech pig farms in China. But the biggest part of our business is games. Contributes about 95% of our revenue yearly. In early 2000s, we developed our first title, which was a PC MMO called Fantasy Westward Journey, and found huge success. So we developed a few more. Mid-2000s, we started publishing all of Blizzard's titles into China, so World of Warcraft and StarCraft, Hearthstone, etc. We didn't publish our first mobile game until about 2 years ago, or less than 2 years ago. So we're a little late to the game, but we've definitely made up for lost time. Right now, App Annie has us at number 6, top grossing worldwide on iOS. Android, it's kind of hard to compare because we actually have not published, we've published very few of our games so far outside of China. So, Android, and I'll get to that later, but Android is very kind of fragmented and disparate in China, so it's hard to measure. But we have 3 top grossing hits. MMOs are definitely our expertise. We're taking everything that we learned from what we did on PC and applying that to mobile, and it's going very well for us. Our number 1 game is Fantasy Westward Journey. So we launched it in late March last year, right after GDC, and since then we've pretty much been number 1 in China on iOS. That's pretty atypical because the Chinese charts are a lot more volatile than over here. Here, it's kind of been the same for the past 3 years, whereas in China it fluctuates a lot. So it's pretty remarkable that we've been able to maintain this long and are still going really strong. Currently, and this really only published in China, and with that, we're top 5th grossing app in the world on iOS. We're doing around over $1 million a day. I can't say exactly, but we've had days that have been substantially larger than that, shockingly large. We actually just announced today that we're at about 30 million installs, and we had a record-breaking 2 million peak concurrent players on a number of occasions. And interestingly enough, just to kind of show how well this game monetizes and performs, we did actually publish this game on the US App Store, but entirely in Chinese, absolutely no translation whatsoever. And a few weeks ago, it got up to 38th grossing. It was shocking to all of us, but I guess we attributed that to Chinese students that are abroad over here in the US, which is a really small population to take a game up to, even on the top 100 charts. While we're mainly focused on bringing our games to the West, a lot of the learnings that we have are applicable to you guys when you're looking at bringing your games to China. And so we've done a ton of research and studies around really trying to quantify the differences in game design, because there's things like culturalization and translation, which are kind of obvious. If you're bringing a game to China, you need to put it in Mandarin. It'd be good to, culturalize some of the art, maybe include, some, Chinese cultural characters, if it makes sense in there. But the Chinese actually consume Western content and they like it. So it's really not necessary. What I think is more interesting is kind of the nuts and bolts and the not so obvious things that you have to change. And then we'll talk about navigating distribution a little bit because it's very different over there. And then close out with just maybe giving a little advice on choosing the right strategy. So the game that we're going to use is West Arena. It's our number 2 game. Just realize that that's not a swastika. That's a Buddhist symbol. Something we have to take out of our games when we bring them here. But it's an ARPG MOBA game. It was launched in November 2014. It's still maintaining the top 5. Fluctuates between top 5 and top 25 grossing on iOS. So super successful game. Does very well. And I think it's a good case study because over 50% of the market in China is owned by card battlers and RPGs. So this is definitely an RPG. So I'm going to start at the beginning with the tutorial. And what you see in this chart over here is the first hour of gameplay on laid out. And each of those little orange dots that you see are the number of instances, or the instances at which we teach the user something new. So every time we're introducing new features, new gameplay modes, new abilities and stuff like that. You can see with a lot of the, I don't know if you could see the text, but the ones below are mostly Western games. It's pretty evenly distributed about over the first hour. Whereas if you look at Fantasy Westward Journey, and this was come to through a lot of testing, and this is just what works best for retention, we found, is that we pretty much introduce every single element of the game in the first 5 minutes. And then you'll see going down, we don't introduce something new until about 30 minutes into the experience after that, and then about another 10 minutes after that. And so what we found is that Chinese players, they like to kind of see everything. They want to know exactly what this game entails. And then after that, because we've just introduced them to so much all at once, we make them repeat that over and over again for the next hour. And I think this is a really good example of something that's generally counterintuitive to us in the West, because I think we're typically hyper conscious of not avoiding cognitive overload and like really making players think. The first 5 minutes of the game, they're just learning tons of stuff. And a good example of something that's not totally obvious and something that you'd want to kind of look at if you're thinking about bringing your game to China. The next thing is gameplay and progression. I'm not sure what those hashtags are, but so you see West Arena, we have over 10 different gameplay modes, which is a lot. You see the other 2 Chinese games, the one with 8 is Heroes Charge and Tai Chi Panda. They have 8 and 9. And typically, and if you've played Heroes Charge, you're probably pretty familiar with this. It's actually a really good case study for a very Chinese game that's translated to English. That's been successful kind of in both places. Is that it's the same core gameplay, but just repackaged, and with either different objectives or you're fighting different types of monsters or whatever. And that's tied in with a really complex progression systems. Where in West Arena we have over 15 different gating mechanics, which is typically higher than what you find out here in the West. And big reason for that is what normally takes a Western player to get the amount of content that a Western player normally gets through in about 2 months, a Chinese player will just chug through in about 2 weeks. And so without all these different modes and gate mechanics, it would be impossible to keep up with the amount of content that you'd have to be putting out to have, for players to have something to do. Autoplay is also really important. We're starting to see it over here, but in China it is almost a requirement. Over 85% of our users use autoplay regularly, and which was strange to me as well. It was at least strange to me. I don't know if it was strange to you, but when I first went over there and I saw our pipeline of games for the next year or so, all of them had autoplay, and it just did not make sense to me. But what really appeals to Chinese gamers is not the actual action, really. It's the meta around it, it's the strategy, and then they just kind of like to watch it unfold in front of them. And also, when you're having 15 different gates to go through and progression is really slow and you're grinding a ton, you don't want to have to be staring at your phone the whole time. So what you'll see is a lot of people play throughout the day and just like kind of have it sitting running on their desk while they're at work. Another big difference is PvP is essential in China. You can see in West Arena it takes up 40% of the gameplay is PvP, and in the West, it's generally it's a lot of games have it, but it's not necessarily required that you play through it. Whereas in most Chinese games, it is a core part of progression that you absolutely have to engage in to move forward in the game. So last part I'll touch on with this is monetization. So Chinese monetization systems are really sophisticated and complex to what we really generally see over here. Just totally different approach to designing a game, and it's really kind of at the core of this for the Chinese, whereas in the West we generally start with a core gameplay and kind of build all the systems and everything around that, whereas in China they actually start with a monetization system and just fit things in around it and inside of it. And so in West Arena, there are 29 different things to spend money on, which is a lot. And another key difference as well is that generally in Western games like energy, for instance, you could just buy, if you want to buy energy all day and keep playing, you generally can. There's nothing stopping you from that. Whereas in Chinese games, you can never directly purchase something. It's always, you have to purchase a number of things to get the thing you want. And energy, I think, is a good example because it's kind of different to how we approach it in that, VIP tiers commonly gate the amount of energy you could buy in a day. So, maybe to start out at VIP tier 1, you can refill your energy twice, and in order to get to VIP tier, to be able to do it 3 times, you have to spend another $500 to unlock the next VIP tier to just be able to, buy more energy. So, I hope, just kind of top-level stuff that I hope kind of illustrates, some of the things that you'll need to think about when you're bringing your game. It's really not just translation. It's not redoing your art. You really kind of have to get into the guts of your game and adapt it for kind of the different behavior of gamers over there. And so, moving on to distribution, here we have to deal with we have to deal with Google and Android, or Android and iOS. In China, Google is banned, so there's no Play Store. So, the results of that is that there are over 400 different app stores in China. And so about there's 6 of them that have the lion's share of users. It's about 60% between the 6 of them. So that leaves 40%. There's 300 million mobile gamers in China. So that's about 100 million mobile gamers that are in like 394 different app stores. So here, where think about all the effort and time that you put into building relationships and managing the relationship with just Apple and Google, and just multiply that by 200. And so it takes a ton of effort and time, and there, even with that, there are still some differences. It's Android channels generally take between 30 and up to 60 and sometimes more of your sales. And another key difference here is, here, featuring is awesome. You get really excited about it. It's free. You get tons of users, potentially millions of dollars worth of users. It's not like that in China. Featuring is actually considered kind of like advertising space, where you're either actually paying a CPI or you're giving up more of your revenue to get that. And another thing to be cautious of is if you have a game and one of the apps, one of the channels reaches out to you, or you reach out to them and they want to do a deal with you. You have to be really careful there, because if you do a direct deal with one of the channels, you really run the risk of all the other channels like blacklisting you and not publishing your game at all. So it's tricky. And so this is kind of how we go about it, and there's 2 ways to avoid those issues that I just mentioned. The first and kind of most important one that we actually do at NetEase is we launch on iOS first. And so if you get a really good featuring on iOS and you rank well and your game is super popular, that gives you just a ton of leverage when you go back to the Android app stores and in negotiating a deal and making sure that you get good distribution. And then what's even harder than that is the rest of it. And so there's a lot of, it's more than just UA in China. It's a lot of like traditional media, a lot of events, billboards, TV ads, stunts. Paid reviews are actually really common there. And the challenging part with that is it is like super cultural, and it would be, for me at least, as a Westerner, it'd be really hard to do any of that with any authenticity. Here's just some examples of that. This is one of the first games that we actually launched on mobile, Ninja Must Die 2. And just some examples of promotions that we did that I think as a Westerner it would be just really hard to pull this off in China without somebody there helping you. As the first on the left, we hired a bunch of really famous cosplayers in China to dress up like ninjas and run in a marathon. And we got a ton of coverage from that, and actually resulted in a lot of users. The one on the right, we manufactured a fake news story about how our gamers loved Ninja Must Die 2 so much, and they played it so much that they actually convinced themselves that they were ninjas and started like doing backflips off buildings and whatnot. And there was this rush of the hospitals were overwhelmed with people injured from doing this. And so that would never occur to me to do here. If I was a Western studio thinking about taking my game to China, I would have a really hard time, even thinking about doing something like this, and then much less doing it with authenticity, because I'm sure you've all seen products or content come over from China that are trying to appear as if they came from the West, but you could just tell immediately that they just kind of didn't get it, and it's the same there. Chinese people, they can tell when people are, they don't really understand the culture and they don't really get what they're getting into. So, getting to the last part, choosing the right strategy, and really do believe this, whether it's us or somebody else, you really do need a partner over there. It's just so vastly different from game design and really understanding how Chinese players behave, interact with games, to managing all the distribution channels, and then down to all the other types of marketing that are not really so common here in the West. And so just some advice here is, really do not take the first deal that you're offered. Talk to everybody. Make sure that you trust them, because in a lot of cases you're actually sending your source code over to them, and they're actually performing all the changes and the localization and the culturalization. So, you need to make sure that you're going to be okay with that. And as well, they're going to be, putting things in your game and suggesting things that may not seem, may seem weird, just off to you. And you really need to be able to trust them that they know what they're doing, and that they're making the right decisions for your title. Another thing is, really should, if you want to do this properly, it takes time, especially if you're going in and redesigning systems, adding different gameplay styles, making PvP more prevalent. You need to budget the time to actually implement all of that stuff, as well as do all of the market, the channel testing, which is kind of like soft launch here. So 6 to 9 months is average. If you have a really big game, I budget for 12. And so you really want to start this process early, because having a coordinated global launch is best. It really is. Apple is really pushing that now. If you can get featuring here, you'll likely be able to get featuring there. And another issue here is if you launch your game in the West and it's super popular, you really run the risk of either your game ending up in jailbroken stores or even just cloned. And you don't want that. And if that happens, then you're kind of bust. There's not much you could do. So that's it. I know we're behind on time, so I wanted to go a little quickly. So if anybody has any questions, yeah? I can hear you.
So I missed the first couple of minutes of the presentation, so I apologize if you already answered this. So you say you need a partner, and I saw the slide that you have 400 different app stores. Like, what are the top 2, 3 best distribution partners in this market? Because nobody's going to take the time to try to look on Google, which is banned in China. Right.
Meaning like the channels, or
to get into.
So I'll just go back. You can see here. This is by market share by distribution quantity.
Yeah.
So if you hit those top 6 or top 5, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I should rephrase. Because you said if you make a deal with one, the other could blacklist you. So you basically need to get them all, right?
Well, you're unlikely you're going to have relationships with all 400 of them. And a lot of them are very niche and focus on specific types of content or whatnot. And so, that's the hard part, is figuring out which ones you should be focused. Again, there's the obvious ones, but that's still leaving out 100 million players. So
there's nobody that has relations already with 100 and say, I can bring you into those.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean by a partner. Is there's publishers in China like ourselves, Tencent. There's a lot of them, and that's what I meant by a partner. Is really finding a publisher in China that can help you navigate all this, because without that, Nobody's done it yet, to my knowledge. There really hasn't been a Western publisher, that has gone over to China on their own. And there have been like EA set up offices there, Zynga set up offices there. Who else? I think all of them are closed now because even trying to build that up yourself is just so challenging.
Even for those majors, they can't do it.
They didn't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, just a moment.
For iOS, is it the traditional 30%?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the same. Apple's
Okay.
the same everywhere. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
The previous speaker was referring to Japan about how localization was so essential or not. I assume it's the exact same thing. 100%.
100%. I mean, I didn't really go into that much because I think it's kind of obvious. Obviously you need to translate well. It needs to read like a Chinese person wrote it. Because we've all seen English that was clearly not written by by an American or somebody whose native language is English. And you can just tell, and it just it pulls you out of the experience, I would say. There are other obvious parts like culturalization, where the government actually does not allow certain types of imagery, like skeletons. Like skeletons. Well, I'm pretty sure they don't allow skeletons. So you'd have to remove any skeletons from the game. I know we do that from World of Warcraft. We take out all skeletons. Ghosts. People are genuinely afraid of. It's very common to be genuinely afraid of ghosts in China, and so maybe not with the younger generations, but middle-aged and older. It's frightening, and it's like not pleasurable. So stuff like that. But I think really the hard part, I feel like that stuff is generally obvious. You could do some Google searching on that, but I thought kind of data points around actual game design is something that maybe you guys haven't heard yet.
All right, we've got time for one more if anybody has one. All right.
Hi, I know that NetEase has some heavy games like 3D games. Is there any kind of planning on the casual game?
Casual games? Yeah, so we actually do have a bunch of casual games out. We have 4,000 engineers working on mobile games right now. And so we put out a lot. We licensed Cookie Jam from SGN and published that in China. We have a few of our own internal ones. We built a really casual endless runner around the Tom and Jerry IP, which apparently is still really relevant in China. I was surprised by that. And a few others, but our core is MMOs and RPGs, and so that's our main focus, and that's what we're looking at for the big hits. And it does, that's 50% of the market there. So yeah, that's kind of why we're focusing on it.
One more question: is there any kind of planning on to build some U.S. culture games to targeting the U.S. market?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking all of our, so right now, the main focus of our North American office really is to, culturalize our games in China and bring them here. And so we're really focused on that, and our goal there is that, Western players would have no idea that the game was made in China. They would think that it was made in America by, for Americans. And, since we have such a robust pipeline and we're just getting started, we're really focused on that. But, definitely down the road, we'll start, the plan is to start developing original IP in the West for the West.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.